Nobody talked about the Blackridge Asylum after it burned down in 1986. Official records listed it as an accidental fire, a tragedy caused by faulty wiring and a storm that struck the area with biblical rage. But the townsfolk of New Dorset, those who had been there long enough to remember, knew better. They remembered the screams that came from the stone halls before the fire ever started. They remembered the strange silence that followed the blaze, as if something unnatural had been sealed beneath the ruins. For nearly 4 decades, no one dared step beyond the rusted fence that still stood, crooked and overgrown, around the charred remains of the asylum. Till now, Jackson Cole never believed in ghost stories. He was a practical man, a former structural engineer turned treasure hunter. He ran a YouTube channel called Urban Excavator, and his latest obsession came from an anonymous email tip he received 3 weeks ago. There's a vault beneath Blackridge that was never recovered. Not a bank vault, an asylum vault. Hidden beneath the operating wing. Government records claim nothing was stored there. But there's something. Something locked behind a door that predates the building itself. The email contained an attachment, an old blueprint of the asylum's lower levels. The marked vault had no documented entry point. But Jackson's experience told him there was always a way in. That was all the motivation he needed. On a wind-blown Tuesday morning in late October, Jackson stood outside the chain-link gate to Blackridge Asylum with a team of 3. His best friend and camera operator Mark Holloway, urban explorer and medic Ava Torres, and sound engineer Kyle Jeffers. "Creepy as hell," Kyle muttered, chewing nervously on his lip. His eyes stayed fixed on the blackened skeleton of the asylum building. "It's just charred bricks and bad press," Jackson replied, lifting the bolt cutters to the rusted gate. "Let's find out what they didn't want us to see." The gate groaned open like a dying thing. Inside the grounds, nature had claimed everything. Vines choked the skeletal remains of the building, and twisted trees grew up through collapsed walls. The group stepped over broken beams, bricks, and half-melted iron as they picked their way through what had once been the main hallway. Mark kept the camera rolling, whispering commentary for the channel. "The smell of smoke still clings to the air, even after 39 years. The deeper we go, the quieter the world becomes." "Stop narrating like it's a damn horror film," Ava muttered, brushing spiderwebs from her shoulder. "It is a horror film," Kyle replied. "We're walking into a place where 57 patients died in a fire." "No," Jackson corrected quietly. "The official record says 32. The rest were unaccounted for." The silence that followed was absolute. They descended what was left of a stone stairwell into the basement levels. Moldy air pushed against them like damp cloth, thick and heavy with mildew and time. Jackson moved ahead, eyes fixed on his scanner. It wasn't for ghosts, it was a GPR scanner, designed to detect density anomalies underground. And it was reacting. The asylum's basement opened into a sprawling corridor, lined with rusted doors that had once led to medical storage, confinement rooms and records. Jackson checked the blueprint again, comparing it to the route on his scanner. They found it after 15 minutes of weaving through rubble and decay, a slab of stone embedded in the back wall of an old surgery room. It was out of place, ancient and seamless. The stone bore no markings, no handles, no hinges. "Holy hell," Ava whispered. "That's not concrete. It looks like limestone." "It's not limestone," Jackson said. "It's too smooth. No tool marks. And the scanner says there's an empty chamber behind it. 7 by 7 meters. "But there's no door," Mark said, lowering the camera slightly. Jackson smiled. "There is. You just can't see it." He knelt beside the wall, brushing away decades of grime and soot. His fingers found an indentation in the floor, no larger than a coin. He pulled a silver object from his backpack, an antique key found buried in the envelope with the blueprints. They hadn't known what it was for until now. The key slid into the floor indentation with a satisfying click. The entire wall trembled. Stone grated against stone as a vertical seam appeared. Then, slowly, impossibly, the slab shifted inward and to the side, revealing a passageway shrouded in pitch darkness. A blast of cold air pushed out from the opening, air that hadn't breathed free in nearly half a century. Ava clicked on her flashlight and stepped forward, then stopped. What is that smell? Jackson smelled it too. Not decay. Not mold. Something older. Like blood and roses. Like copper and burnt sugar. He turned on his own light and led the group into the passage. Tunnel led down. Not just below the building but deep beneath the earth. The temperature dropped with every step. The walls shifted from charred stone to something smooth and ancient, with faint carvings that glinted under the flashlight's beam. Symbols that looked like they didn't belong to any known alphabet. No one spoke. No one needed to. Their footsteps echoed down the corridor like a heartbeat. After 10 minutes of descent, the passage opened into a circular chamber. Walls lined with iron shelves, covered in dust and broken glass. In the center stood a pedestal. Upon it, a black metal box, smooth as obsidian, etched with symbols that seemed to shift as the light moved. Jackson approached the box and saw his reflection in the metal. Only, the reflection didn't move when he did. A second later it did move. Only it smiled at him. Jackson staggered back. His voice caught in his throat. "You all saw that, right?" he asked. "I didn't see anything," Ava said. "Dude, your face." Mark began but stopped. He pointed to the box. The box was gone. The pedestal was empty. Jackson turned around slowly. The black box now sat on the floor behind them. None of them had touched it. "What the hell is going on?" Kyle whispered. Then the lights went out. Total darkness swallowed the chamber. The flashlights flickered, then died. The cold deepened. And from the darkness came a sound that turned their bones to ice. Voice. Not loud. Not angry. Not human. It whispered only one word. "Return." Jackson's heart thundered. He fumbled for a flare in his pack and struck it. The room ignited in red light. They were no longer alone. Figures stood along the edges of the chamber. Shadowy, motionless, but watching. They wore patient gowns scorched with fire. Their eyes glowed faintly red. And as the flare hissed, they began to step forward in unison. "Run!" Jackson shouted. They turned and fled back into the tunnel. Ava tripped, Kyle dragged her up. The shadows followed, silent but swift. Jackson turned mid-sprint and hurled the flare behind them. As it clattered to the floor, the light illuminated the shadow figures again. They had stopped, as if the light held them back. They emerged breathless into the ruined basement. And the tunnel was gone. The door had sealed itself. Seamless. No keyhole. No box. No pedestal. Only wall. Jackson backed away slowly. Ava was crying. Kyle's hand was bleeding. Mark looked like he couldn't breathe. "I got it all," he whispered. "On camera. I got everything." But when they reviewed the footage back at their cabin outside town, there was nothing. No tunnel. No box. No flare. No shadows. Only footage of them staring at a cracked, empty wall. "Did it mess with our minds?" Ava asked. "Make us imagine it." "No," Jackson said and held up his hand. In his palm sat the key. And beneath the key was the black box. Only this time it was open. Inside something shifted. Something breathing. The box didn't make a sound. Not a rattle, not a hum. But it felt loud. It radiated a weight, a hum beneath the skin, a pressure in the skull. As Jackson stared down at it in the dim cabin light, he had the unshakable sense that it was aware of him. Aware of them. The interior of the box was lined with velvet blacker than shadow, as if it absorbed light rather than reflected it. And inside that velvet cradle, something lay coiled like a sleeping animal. No bigger than a hand. Smooth pale. It resembled a curled-up centipede, but it had eyes. Too many of them. They blinked. Mark recoiled first, nearly knocking over the chair. Ava gasped and backed into the wall. Kyle turned pale, his breath short and sharp. "It's alive," Ava whispered. "You brought it back here, Jackson. You brought it out." "I didn't bring anything. The box followed us." Jackson's voice was calm but forced. He was staring into the thing's eyes, those small blinking orbs that shimmered like droplets of oil. Then it spoke, not out loud, not in words, but directly into Jackson's head. You opened the door. You broke the seal. You must return what was taken. He staggered backward, knocking the box to the floor. The room filled with a high-pitched static sound that wasn't coming from any equipment. It was coming from everywhere. The lights flickered. The air grew dense, as if underwater. Then the thing in the box began to move. It uncoiled slowly, each leg tapping against the velvet interior. Its body unfolded like a paper chain, longer than it should be. The room was too small for it, yet it kept uncoiling. Then just as suddenly it stopped, and curled back into itself. As if it had never moved at all. Kyle picked up the box carefully and snapped it shut. The moment the lid clicked into place, the room seemed to breathe again. Silence returned. What is it? Kyle asked. Jackson didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind was still ringing from that voice. Mark had stopped filming. The camera sat dead in his hands. Its battery, fully charged earlier, was now completely drained. We need to go to the police, Ava said, voice trembling. We need to tell someone. And say what? Jackson snapped. That we found a living thing in a 50-year-old sealed vault below a burned-down asylum that may or may not exist, and we were chased out by shadow ghosts that don't show up on film? You want to be institutionalized. Better than whatever that thing is, Ava said, pointing at the box. Mark finally spoke. Guys, I'm not saying I believe in curses or demons or haunted vaults, but I haven't stopped hearing voices since we left that place. A long silence followed. Kyle nodded slowly. Me too. They're whispering things. I can't sleep. They say names. Sometimes mine. Jackson sat down at the table. He pulled out the blueprint again, staring at the vault marked unknown space. There's more, he whispered. There has to be more. That chamber, it wasn't the only one. There are 2 more chambers shown on this map, connected by hidden corridors. You want to go back? Ava asked in disbelief. I want answers. We brought something out we shouldn't have. We can't just ignore it. Or, Ava countered, we can bury the box, burn it, seal it, never go back. The box began to shake. Everyone froze. It was faint at first, just a soft hum like a phone vibrating on a wooden desk. Then the vibrations grew violent. It rattled across the table like something trying to escape. Kyle grabbed it and screamed. He dropped the box immediately, holding his hand in pain. Blisters formed across his palm, spreading like a burn. Ava rushed to help, grabbing the first aid kit. Mark stared at the box, then turned to Jackson. What the hell did we wake up? That night, none of them slept. Jackson sat outside on the porch, flashlight in one hand, the key in the other. He kept hearing the voice. Not in dreams, not even in hallucinations, but in clear, calm thought. Beneath the earth the eye watches. The seal is broken. Return what was taken, or take what cannot be returned. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew the longer the box stayed with them, the worse things would get. The next morning Kyle was missing. His bed hadn't been slept in. His phone sat on the nightstand, screen cracked, battery drained. His jacket was gone, along with one of the flare guns and a lantern. Jackson found his footprints outside, leading toward the edge of the forest, toward Blackridge. Ava ran after him, barefoot, yelling into the trees. Mark grabbed the gear and followed. Jackson didn't say a word. He already knew. Kyle had gone back to the vault. They followed the trail for half a mile, back to the asylum. The ruins loomed ahead, still and cold beneath the gray morning sky. Inside nothing had changed, until they reached the surgery room. The wall was open. Tunnel was back. And Kyle's flashlight lay just inside it, flickering faintly. They entered, each of them feeling that same pressure again. The walls breathing, the passage watching. The air grew colder. They found Kyle at the edge of the chamber, curled on the ground, whispering to himself. His eyes were open but glazed. His lips moved rapidly, though no words came. "Kyle!" Ava dropped beside him, shaking his shoulder. He looked up and smiled. "They showed me," he said calmly. "They showed me what's coming." "What did?" Jackson asked. "The ones behind the wall," Kyle said. "They're not trapped. They're waiting. The fire didn't kill them. It just fed them." Mark raised his camera. "I'm recording everything." This time the chamber was different. The shelves were gone. The walls were lined with red velvet. And on the pedestal there was a new box. Identical to the first. Only this one was open. Inside was something else. Something much larger. Bone. Not human. Curved like a crescent, carved with symbols. Pulsed faintly. The whisper returned. "You brought it here. Now you must bring the rest." Jackson grabbed Kyle's arm. "We're leaving. Now." But the pedestal flared with light. The door behind them began to close. Mark jammed his tripod into the narrowing seam. Ava screamed, grabbing Kyle as the walls trembled. The floor beneath the pedestal cracked open, and a shaft of red light shot upward into the chamber. Then silence. The box on the pedestal was gone. The chamber was whole again. And the whisper stopped. They fled back into the tunnel, Jackson dragging Kyle behind him. Mark and Ava reached the top first. The wall tried to close again, but Jackson leapt through as the stone grinded to a halt. The door didn't vanish this time. It stayed slightly ajar. They returned to the cabin in stunned silence. No one spoke for hours. That night, Mark uploaded footage from the second visit. And this time something did show up. Not the shadow people. Not the thing in the box. But a symbol, scorched into the wall behind the pedestal. A circle with a slit across it like a vertical eye. It appeared in 3 separate frames before vanishing. And when the footage ended, their generator died. Everything went black. From the woods beyond the cabin, they heard the whisper again. Closer. And now it said something new. The power didn't return until sunrise. Jackson stood by the window the entire night, watching the woods. He didn't sleep. None of them did. The box sat on the table like a coiled threat, humming so faintly now it felt like tinnitus. The others paced. Kyle hadn't spoken again since the second encounter in the vault. He just rocked slowly in the corner, his lips murmuring nonsense. At dawn the silence broke. He looked up at Jackson with bloodshot eyes. "You don't get to leave," he said flatly. "It's in your hands now." Then Kyle passed out. Ava rushed to him, checking his pulse. He was breathing but shallowly. Mark sat on the couch, scrolling through the recovered footage again, playing the segment that showed the strange burning symbol. "Still think this is all just hallucination?" he asked. "No," Jackson said. "I think it's a message." He unrolled the blueprints again. His eyes locked on the small symbols marked next to each chamber. The first one, where they found the box, had a carved eye next to it. The second chamber, too. Both had been in places never marked on original architectural plans. Jackson flipped the page and found something hidden beneath a taped corner. Third symbol. 6 vaults. Only 2 had been opened. "You said it last night," Mark whispered. 6 boxes. 6 bones. The vault must open. Or the world must close. "What does it mean?" Ava asked. "What happens if all 6 are opened? What happens if they aren't?" Jackson countered. "We triggered something. But maybe there's a reason those boxes exist. Maybe they're not meant to be buried. Or maybe," Ava said bitterly, "we're just feeding something that should have stayed asleep." They stared at the key again. It still pulsed in his palm. The box on the table began to shake again, but softer now, rhythmic like breathing. Then Jackson noticed something new. A tiny crack on the underside of the box. He knelt down and pried it open with his pocket knife. A sliver of rusted parchment slid out. Handwritten text. "When the final bone rests in the circle of 6, The breach may close. The others must be reclaimed. Use the light. The light? Mark asked. Jackson turned the paper over. A symbol was drawn in ink. A lantern with 6 flames. They all stared at each other. I think we're being given instructions, Jackson said. To put something back together. No way, Ava said. No more exploring, no more digging, no more vaults. If we stop now, what happens to Kyle? Jackson asked. To us. At that moment Kyle screamed. Not out of fear. Out of pain. His body lifted off the couch, arms stretched wide, eyes rolling white. From his throat came a voice that was not his. The first has been returned. 5 remain. You are the vessel. You are the breach. Then he dropped. His breathing stabilized. But the room didn't. The air twisted. The shadows stretched. The box glowed faint red. And then it shattered. The bone inside evaporated into ash and scattered across the floor. Did we just fail? Ava asked. No, Jackson said. I think it was accepted. They all turned to the blueprints again. The third vault, the one marked 6, was beneath the eastern wing. The wing that collapsed during the fire. And according to the blueprint, it could only be accessed through a shaft hidden inside the collapsed wall of the infirmary. They packed their gear before sunset. They had flares, full batteries, digital and analog backups. Ava loaded tranquilizers, just in case Kyle became unstable again. Mark brought an EMF meter, just to confirm something was happening in the air around them. At dusk, they returned to Blackridge. The third time. The infirmary wing had nearly collapsed entirely. Broken walls leaned like drunken giants. Thorny weeds had overtaken the hallways. They climbed over crumbled support beams, following the schematic Jackson held tight in gloved hands. Then he found it. Behind what used to be a row of rusted beds, beneath an iron grate covered in ash and soot, a ladder, descending vertically into darkness. The air below the grate was warm. Too warm. Mark dropped a sensor. Humidity spike, he said. And EMFs peaking. They went down. The ladder stretched 50 feet below the surface. At the bottom, an octagonal chamber lined with mirrors. Only none of them showed their reflections. Jackson waved his flashlight. Nothing bounced back. I don't like this, Ava muttered. In the center of the room, as before, stood a pedestal. On it a third box. This one was white. Pale ivory. The moment Jackson stepped closer, a howl rose from the walls. Mirrors shattered inward. Red mist leaked from the fractures, swirling in slow, unnatural spirals. The box clicked open. Inside, another bone. Longer than the last. Carved with markings. This one bled a black fluid. Mark screamed. He turned his camera on himself. It's behind me. I can feel it. Something's breathing on me. They grabbed the bone and ran. But the mist followed. It poured from the room, crawling up the walls like fingers. The air felt thick with screams. By the time they reached the ladder, the shaft began to collapse. They climbed fast. At the surface, Ava turned and fired her flare gun downward. The mist recoiled, shrieking like metal. The vault sealed again. They ran back to the cabin, panting, bleeding from scratches they hadn't noticed until then. Inside, they dropped the box onto the table. Shook violently. Then opened on its own. The bone crumbled to ash. The cabin trembled. Kyle stood up, eyes still blank. He walked to the table and whispered, 3 remain. The circle must be full. Then he collapsed again. Mark dropped into a chair, shaking. This isn't a haunting, he said. It's a ritual. Ava nodded. A machine. Jackson added. Or a gate. What if we don't finish it? Ava asked. They all turned to the window. The woods beyond the cabin no longer looked real. The trees shifted, like they were breathing. And from the blackest parts of the forest, 6 red eyes stared back at them. Then a voice, not from Kyle, but from the shadows outside. The next morning began with silence. Not the peaceful kind. This was dead silence. No birds. No insects. No wind. The woods around the cabin looked frozen. Even the sun seemed to cast a colder, flatter light. The black box on the table had vanished. And so had the ash from the second bone. Kyle was still breathing but now spoke in his sleep, low and rhythmic like a chant. The words were unfamiliar, guttural, ancient. Mark recorded it, played it backward, still gibberish, until Jackson slowed it down, and realized it was coordinates. Northwest edge of the valley. Coordinates match the edge of the lake near Old Route 14, Jackson said, spreading out the topographic map. There's nothing out there but trees. Unless the fourth vault is buried beneath it, Ava muttered. Mark leaned forward. Let me get this straight. These things, whatever they are using Kyle to speak. They're giving us vault locations. But not why. We still don't know what we're releasing or binding, or whatever the hell we're doing. Jackson turned toward the window. We're not unlocking them anymore, he said quietly. We're returning them. The whisper said, return what was taken. These bones, these boxes, maybe they were removed from something. Something that needs to be sealed. Ava asked. Then why did it start after we opened the first vault? Because we woke it up. Mark grabbed his camera and sat at the table. Let's record this. Jackson nodded and faced the camera. If you're watching this, we don't have much time left. Something was buried under Blackridge Asylum. 6 vaults, 6 bones, each one sealed for decades, maybe centuries. We've already recovered 3. Each one took something from us. I don't know if finishing this will save us or doom us. But if we stop now, something worse breaks through. The video cut as a loud knock echoed through the cabin. 3 sharp bangs. Someone was at the door. Ava drew her tranquilizer gun and peeked through the curtain. It's an old man. Alone. Jackson opened the door cautiously. The man stood hunched, wearing a long brown coat and cracked glasses. His face was wrinkled and sunburned, with wild white hair and a twitching jaw. You opened them, he said. Didn't you? Jackson stepped out onto the porch. Who are you? The old man didn't answer. He stepped forward and shoved something into Jackson's hand. Small badge. It read, Dr. Thomas Ellery, Blackridge Psychiatric Center. You worked there? Jackson asked. I survived it, Ellery whispered. They didn't. Inside, they gathered around him. Eva made tea. The doctor's hand shook. His eyes kept darting to the corners of the room. You should have left it buried, he said. The vaults weren't meant to contain treasures. They were built to hold parts. Pieces of something that fell through. Long before the asylum was even built. You're saying the boxes weren't made by humans? Mark asked. No, Ellery said. But they were found by humans. Worship. Moved. Hidden. Until Blackridge. We used the asylum as a cover. Most staff didn't know. But the 6 deepest rooms, those weren't ours. Who moved the pieces? Eva asked. The Order of the Hollow Eye, Ellery said. A group older than you want to believe. They built the vaults, guarded them. But when the fire started in '86, the seals cracked. You were there? Jackson asked. Ellery nodded. I ran the East Wing. Room 6C. One of the 6 vault nodes. I watched a patient burn alive without fire. He split open. Bones came out of him. Not his bones. They moved on their own. Crawled back toward the wall. No one said a word. Then Ellery said, You're already marked. The ash clings to you. Can smell it. You've got 3 bones left. Once you return them, you'll face the eye itself. Jackson showed him the map. Ellery's finger trembled over the coordinates Kyle had whispered. Lake Blackridge. 4th vaults in the lake bed. Wasn't accessible until the drought hit a few years ago. Ava narrowed her eyes. Then we're on the clock. That night, they packed up and left before sunset. The lake was low, exposing dark earth and broken trees. Mist clung to the ground. Jackson's detector pinged a density void beneath the lake bed, 30 feet down. They dug until the spade struck metal. A rusted grate, sealed with chains. The moment the last chain snapped, the grate hissed open and hot steam rolled out. They descended a corroded spiral staircase into an underground chamber filled with water up to the ankles. Carvings lined the walls, strange symbols partially eroded. One looked like a door, another a tooth. At the far end, the pedestal. On it the fourth box, blue, covered in sea salt. It was already open. "No way," Ava whispered. "Somebody's been here." Inside, a bone twisted like coral, covered in tiny eyes. Each one blinked. Jackson grabbed it, and the water froze solid. Not froze over. Froze in place. Mid-splash. Mid-motion. Time had stopped. Then the voice returned. Not from Kyle this time, but from beneath the floor. "One waits behind the veil. One watches with many mouths." They looked down. Beneath the ice, beneath the stone was a face. A massive face. Blinked. And then screamed. Chamber shook. Cracks raced across the ice. Jackson shoved the bone into the box and slammed it shut. Time restarted. Water splashed. Lights flickered. Kyle above screamed like he was being gutted. They ran. The staircase crumbled as they emerged. The lake swirled violently, forming whirlpools around the drained vault. Back at the cabin, Jackson set the box down and opened it. The bone had vanished. The ash spiraled upward, and etched another symbol into the ceiling. Full circle. For slashes across it. For returned. To left. Ellery stared at the ceiling. "The fifth vault is mine," he whispered. "I hid it when I escaped." "Where?" Jackson asked. Ellery turned slowly, his eyes now glowing faintly red. "I never left room 6C. Before anyone could move, he collapsed. And from his chest, a bone rolled out. Rain lashed the stained glass windows of the rectory as Agent Callahan stood in front of the fireplace, watching embers die in the hearth. The storm outside had worsened since they returned to the church. Neither he nor the remaining members of the original crew, Lena, Bishop Renner, and old Thomas Greeley, had spoken much since descending from the ruins. They had all heard the same thing, the whisper that called them by name in their own voice. None of them wanted to admit it, but something ancient had awakened beneath St. Anselm. Thomas finally broke the silence. "That vault wasn't built for keeping money. It was a prison." Callahan turned slowly. "Then what was the prisoner?" Thomas lit a cigarette with trembling fingers. "It was never written down directly. Only hinted in sermons. Letters between clergymen. But there were symbols etched into the old stone, pre-Christian. The kind that shouldn't exist this far west. The church built the vault on top of something far older." Callahan, tired but relentless, grabbed a book from the desk. A brittle, handwritten registry from the 1800s. "We need to understand what it is before it comes for us. Or before we do something stupid like open the wrong door." Lena, still pale from the encounter with the mirror room, where she'd watched her own reflection tear itself apart, shook her head. "We already did. We triggered something when we went in. We didn't just find the vault. We woke it up." The storm knocked out the lights. The rectory was plunged into darkness, save for the flickering of firelight. Then, faintly, the ringing of the church bell echoed from the steeple. Midnight. No one had pulled the rope. Bishop Renner crossed himself. The last time that bell rang by itself was during the '39 blackout, hours before Father Marin was found dead in the baptismal pool, face up but drowned. Thomas added grimly. His body was twisted like it had fallen from a height, but there were no broken windows, no impact wounds, just wrong. A loud crash came from the sanctuary. Callahan pulled his sidearm and flicked on a flashlight. "Everyone stay behind me." The group moved cautiously through the side hallway, boots echoing on the stone floor. The sanctuary was empty, at first. Then they saw it, claw marks gouged into the pews. Deep fresh, leading up to the altar. The crucifix had fallen, Christ's face cracked in two, one half smiling, the other weeping. Lena whispered, "We're not alone anymore." That was when the chanting began. Low, rhythmic. It came from the crypt beneath the altar. The same sealed door they had broken open days before. Only this time it wasn't just air escaping, it was voices. Multiple. Whispering prayers that didn't belong to any religion they knew. Thomas backed away. No, that can't be. Those are the words from the Psalms of Dust. Callahan looked confused. You mean the apocryphal text? The one the Vatican sealed away in the 1600s? Thomas nodded. I saw a translation once. It was banned because the prayers didn't ask for salvation. They invited possession. Suddenly, the organ began to play by itself. A haunting, fractured version of Ave Maria echoed through the church. Lena screamed. A figure stood in the pews. No face. Just darkness where features should be. Callahan fired 2 shots, but the figure didn't flinch. It simply turned and walked down into the crypt. They followed, despite every instinct telling them to run. Down the winding staircase where the walls bled moisture, and the air grew colder with each step. They passed the vault again, still sealed. But the voices were louder now, coming from behind the door at the far end of the corridor. A true chamber. It had been walled over, hidden, only visible through the cracks when Thomas had knocked over a lantern during their first trip. Callahan pushed against it. The bricks were old, weak. They crumbled easily, revealing a narrow downward spiral stair. The steps looked freshly used. Someone's been going down there recently, Callahan said. Or something. As they descended, Lena began to murmur unintelligibly. Then louder, as if in a trance. The others stopped. Her eyes rolled back in her head. He returns in blood and bone. Bound in vault. Freed in sin. Take the mark. Drink the ash. Renner grabbed her. Lena, stop. Don't say it. But it was too late. The chamber below them had awakened. The stone floor cracked beneath them, revealing a pool of black liquid, swirling with reflections of all their faces. Only not quite right. Each reflection looked slightly wrong. Too many teeth. Extra fingers. Glowing eyes. Callahan stepped closer. One of the reflections grinned at him and blinked. Then it rose from the pool. It was him. Another Agent Callahan, soaked in the black fluid, gun already drawn. Renner screamed and ran. His own reflection stepped from the pool next, tackling him to the floor. Lena collapsed, murmuring prayers. Thomas tried to pull her back, but the chamber had no rules anymore. It twisted like a funhouse mirror, angles shifting, doorways multiplying. Callahan fought his doppelganger hand to hand. The other version was faster, stronger, but it didn't bleed when shot. It only laughed, his laugh. He tackled it into the pool. He expected water. Instead he fell through time. Visions assaulted him. The original heist. The moment they broke the vault. The crypt glowing red as something old and winged unfolded itself from the darkness. Father Merrin screaming. Lena kissing a man that wasn't him in a life that never happened. Thomas praying to a god he no longer believed in. And then silence. Callahan landed hard on a stone floor. But everything was different. The chamber was empty again. No liquid. No doppelgangers. Just torches flickering on ancient walls. Then he saw the altar. It wasn't Christian. It wasn't anything he recognized. The artifact that had gone missing during the heist, the obsidian orb, sat atop the altar, pulsing like a heart. He approached slowly. Suddenly, a voice filled the room. You can end this. Callahan turned. Lena stood behind him, but older, worn, eyes glowing faintly. In your time you opened the door, she said softly. You let it through. But here, this is the moment of choice. He looked at the orb. Pulsed faster. Destroy it. She shook her head. No. Contain it. Use the vault. Not to steal but to seal. That's what it was for. That's why it was built in secret. A prison for this. Callahan reached out then paused. What if I fail again? Lena smiled. Then we loop. Until someone chooses right. With that she faded. Callahan grabbed the orb. The room shook. Walls cracked. The vault door slammed shut above. And the world went white. The tunnels groaned with ancient sorrow as the group descended deeper. The walls, once slick with moisture, were now cracked, flaking like burnt parchment. The air thinned, but the whispers grew louder. No longer incomprehensible murmurings but fully formed words. And they were calling names. Eliza. Marcus. Tom. The three survivors halted. The voice was distorted, echoing from all directions, and somehow laced with the exact tone their own mothers would have used. It clawed at their sanity, speaking directly into their memories. Eliza pressed her hands over her ears. This is not real. This is not real. Tom stumbled forward, flashlight flickering. We need to finish what we started. Marcus was already 30 feet ahead, drawn by something none of them could see. His voice was calm, eerie. We're close. They reached a chamber, one not shown on any map, old or new. Inside, the walls were lined with relics. Wooden masks, rusted daggers, even jars filled with cloudy fluid holding things. But at the center stood something that looked entirely out of place. A modern vault. Chrome steel. Biometric lock. Reinforced. The very thing that had been buried beneath the ancient foundations. Not guarded, not hidden, but imprisoned. Tom approached. That's it. That's what they were trying to protect. Eliza whispered. Then why do I feel like opening it will kill us all? Marcus, eerily calm, placed his hand on the scanner. Or save us. The lock clicked. With a hiss of air and a low mechanical hum, the vault opened and darkness poured out. Not metaphorically. The light from their flashlights bent and broke as the void emerged like a thick smoke. And within that darkness stood a man. Or what used to be a man. Clad in black robes, flesh-taut and leathery, the thing raised its hand. Its voice sounded like 100 whispering mouths speaking in unison. You came to steal secrets not meant for men. Now you must keep them. Marcus stepped forward. I know who you are. You were the high priest of the cult of Null. You escaped the 1503 purge. You sealed yourself in here. You lived off the offerings. The ones from the bank. The thing nodded. They called it a vault. But it was a tomb. For me. For my knowledge. For what lies beyond. Tom raised the pistol, but it crumbled to dust in his hand. Guns cannot save you, the thing said. But you may still leave, if one of you stays. Ois. Marcus didn't hesitate. Me. Eliza shouted. No, don't. Marcus turned. He showed me. In dreams. In the walls. I saw it all. This was always my fate. But you too go. Tell them what you saw. Warn them. The vault began to seal as Eliza screamed Marcus's name. The last thing she saw was him smiling. Not in fear but in peace. They ran. The tunnels began to collapse behind them, stone and steel falling as if the entire underground had waited centuries to exhale. Tom and Eliza burst into daylight, coughing, bleeding, and changed. The building collapsed entirely just as emergency sirens pierced the air. Firefighters, police, medics, they were safe. Weeks passed. Eliza sat on her apartment balcony, scrolling through her phone. She watched the footage they had captured. And the vault, gone from all files, erased. Every digital trace had been wiped. Only the bruises on their bodies and the hollowness in their eyes remained, until an anonymous email arrived. Video file. Its name. The heist that changed history. P4. She clicked. Footage played. But it wasn't theirs. It was from inside the vault. Marcus was there. But not imprisoned. He stood in front of a mirror-like void, speaking to a figure, robed, shadowed. They'll come again, Marcus said. The world won't stop seeking what it shouldn't. The figure replied. Then we must prepare them. Behind them, figures began to move. Dozens, perhaps hundreds, emerging from the blackness, not quite human, not quite shadow. Eliza shut the laptop. The screen wouldn't turn off. Just one message blinked in crimson text.